Welcome to the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I interview business leaders who are committed to their own growth and the development of everyone on their team. If you enjoy my podcast, be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast platform. Welcome back to another episode of the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. What if you were able to focus on teamship instead of leadership? My guest today is going to explain why this focus is critical now and for the future of work. I'm very excited to have best-selling author Keith Ferrazzi with me today. Welcome, Keith.
Thanks, Meredith. I'm looking forward to the conversation. You're always so thoughtful.
Thank you. Well, let me just give a very brief introduction. I think most of my listeners are probably very familiar with your work. Keith has written books like Never Eat Alone, Who's Got Your Back, and Leading Without Authority. And today we're going to focus on his latest book, which I just loved. It's called Never Lead Alone, 10 Shifts from Leadership to Teamship. Keith is going to be sharing concrete suggestions that you can use right away with your team. So be prepared to take notes. And better yet, grab a copy of his book. It's packed with 37 practices, all of them researched and tested with his clients over the past 20 years. So, Keith, your first book, Never Eat Alone, is a classic now. And this latest book kind of brings it all together, Never Lead Alone. What's the common thread that runs through all of your books?
I think the recognition is the importance of others to your success. If you're a leader and you put everything on your shoulders, it's going to be a very lonely life. As often people say, it's lonely at the top. It shouldn't be, and it doesn't have to be. If you invite your team to step up and meet you in leadership, if you invite your team to help give each other feedback, share accountability with each other. I often say we obviously know the good leaders have to give feedback. Great leaders get the team to give each other feedback. Good leaders breed energy into the team. Great leaders get the team to breed energy into each other. Great leaders make teams hold each other accountable. And that aspect of leadership, which is how do you engineer the team to co-create? And what I created a word, co-elevate, push each other higher, right? You want a team committed to the mission, but committed to helping each other get there. And even as I say that, I think about that for myself, and I think about my own team. And I'm always asking the question, what can I do today that will help Gavin coach Wendy? What will I help do today that will help Wendy co-create better with Kimberly? Right? I mean, it's that essence of lifting the team up. And what we did was we created a set of practices that you can institute at wholesale into your teams that would absolutely make these things happen automatically. And rely less on the artistry of the rarefied leaders who do this naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It is such a succinct description, and it takes care of one of my questions. I love that phrase, co-elevate. I'm so glad you created that, because to me, it speaks to how each of us has the opportunity to help someone else not just feel better about themselves, but recognize their potential and challenge them to be their very best selves. And in so doing, create better results. One of the things that strikes me in one of your early chapters about this whole idea of creating candor, greater candor in the team, what holds this back is this idea of conflict avoidance. And I think you made the statement that your research showed that 72% of team members avoid conflict. So what is it we can do, or leaders can do, and the team can do to make that shift from conflict avoidance to radical candor, if you will, with each other?
Yeah, please. And Kim Malone Scott's a good friend, and that's a great book, Radical Candor. The answer is you can do one of two things. There are companies like Ray Dalio's at Bridgewater, and Amazon, Jeff Bezos's culture, and Jeff Wilke and Andy Jassy's culture. They hire for it. They will make sure that they're hiring people who are resilient, who are focused on the courage of honest and straightforward conversations in the room. Most of us haven't done that. You know, we've hired our natural, insecure, conflict avoidant people that walk around the world all the time. And look, we do this with our friends. I'm constantly among my family trying to get my family to be able to give each other feedback, right? My sons giving each other feedback, etc. And doing it in a loving environment, of course, right? Of course, we're looking not just for respect. That's a minimum. I want to be loving and caring, and therefore I would never let you fail. But what I've done is I've created practices that make it easy. So there's one practice that we use all the time in companies, report outs. So I've got a new initiative where we've got a new research institute leader in our company, and if she's about to present what's the status of our research institute, she doesn't do a report out. She does a stress test. Everything is a stress test, not a report out. And so a stress test is when somebody shows up and they say, okay, since I've been on board or in the last quarter, here's what I've achieved. Boom, 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 boom. Here's where I'm struggling. Boom, 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 boom. And here's where I'm planning to go next. And then the team knows that they're listening with an intention to make sure that they won't let that person fail. They're listening from three perspectives, and they're about to write it down. One, they're listening from the perspective of, what do you need to challenge about this person, what they just said? Are the things that they've achieved, do you see they haven't achieved them? Are the struggles that they have, do you think that they should be adding other things that they're falling short on? The things they're planning to do next, do you think they're enough? So there's a challenge element. Then there's a ideas element. So innovations, ideas, inspiration, other things you could add that they might consider. And then the third is a perspective on where you could help. So what happens is somebody presents, and then everybody goes into breakout rooms of two, whether it's virtual or turn to the person next to you, opens up a Google Doc or a SharePoint document, and you write those answers. Here's what you're missing. Boom, boom, boom. Here's an idea for you. Boom, boom, boom. Here's where I would help. We're working right now to turn around a massive, global, very important consumer packaged goods company. And yesterday we stress tested supply chain. The week before we stress tested one of their primary lines of business. And it's amazing when the team really pays attention and knows that their job is to give that feedback. It's amazing how much wisdom comes out of the woodwork that used to be pent up in private DMing, personal reflections, etc. Mm-hmm. The team now owns each other's success. So that simple shift. So what happens is the average team on a scale of 0 to 5 is a candor of 1.9. 1.9. And answering questions like, we challenge each other in the room when it's risky to do so. You start doing stress testing for 3 months, you'll get up into the 3s. You start doing stress testing for 6 months, you'll get up into the 4s on a scale of 0 to 5. Very simple practice. It's like a superfood for the kind of high performing team you deserve. And what you've done is you've taken the culture you want. You want a challenge culture? You want a creative, inspirational culture? You want a support culture? You've just turned it into an assignment.
Do you find people resist doing that, or are they embracing it? What kind of reaction are you getting?
People are compliant. If you make it an assignment, right? It's an assignment. I'm brought in by the executive, the CEO. The CEO says, let's do stress testing, and we do it. Now, at the beginning, yes, some of the feedback might be a little bit softball, right? Not as candid or focused, but that's part of what I do to coach. So there's another practice. It's called a candor break. So I will sometimes put them together. So we just do a stress test, right? And well, first of all, I always do a diagnostic at the beginning of my coaching. And in the book, the diagnostic is in the book. Every single chapter has a diagnostic. We're right now talking about chapter 3, moving from conflict avoidance to candor. So in chapter 3, there's the questions I would ask for the diagnostic, like, do we challenge each other in the room when it's risky to do so? Average team is 1.9. We go do a stress test, right? Right at the end of the stress test, I say, I'd like to do a candor break. Everybody write on a piece of paper or put into the chat. On a scale of 0 to 5 right now, how candid was this dialogue? So I test them right after they do it.
Hmm.
If the score is anything less than 3.5, I say, okay, so you just had a stress test. And I said, did we just have a level 5 levels of candor? Everything was on the table. Everything, your inside voice was on the outside, etc. Or were we a 0 where we were highly conflict avoidant, cowardice? We weren't, we were mediocre in our willingness to be high grade professionals. Where were we? And if it was anything less than 3.5, I'm like, okay, we're redoing it. Go into groups of 2. And I want you to come back, be prepared to share what wasn't said that needed to be said. Why did you put 2 in your score just now? Right? And I have them do it again. And when they come back, they gain more courage through a stronger assignment. And then we redo the test. And usually at that time, we're into 3s, 4s, and 5s. And I say to them, listen, why couldn't we have done that without me bullying you to do it? Like I had to be, I'm a pretty tough coach. Like in the spectrum of coaching, I'm not the kind of guy that comes in and sweetly asks questions. I'm like, listen, you're right now a 1.9 in your candor. That is mediocre performance. You're not going to turn the company around this way. Frankly, I think it's stealing from shareholders. You're not adhering to your fiduciary responsibility. Let's get on the stick. Come on, let's move. I mean, that's the kind of coach that I am. I sound more like my father than I do the average coach that learns how to ask hypothetical questions and pauses and listens. Because at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get you to try these practices because I know these practices are game changing.
And one of the other things though that you do build in is a question that I know in your book you say this is another one of these game changers. And it is more on, I won't say the soft side, but it's helping to tap in and connect with people, this personal professional check-in. Talk about that as one of your practices, because it just seems like that's so powerful.
Yeah. So first of all, I want us to recognize that the success of what we're talking about here is, and if I don't know if you mind, would you mind if I shared a slide for your viewing audience?
Go ahead. Most people are listening, but
that?
they'll be tempted to go watch the YouTube
Right?
video. Sure.
Right. So here we go. Can you see the slide I'm sharing?
Yes.
So the whole book is really, you could organize it into 3 tiers. The most important thing is this middle tier that I call a challenge culture. And it's chapter 3, chapter 10, and both of those talk about, number 1, can we have everything on the table? Do we have full candor in the room? Right? So that's chapter 3, shifting from conflict avoidance to candor. And then in chapter 10, I talk about how do you get your team to be each other's coaches? How do we get them to be on a peer-to-peer growth trajectory? But I recognize that it is so important that a team feel psychological safety and trust with each other before they can do that. And so there are 3 chapters, one on how do you get your team to bond with each other and care about each other more, and empathize. How do you get your team to commit to helping each other's energy? And how do you get your team to be celebratory and lifting each other up? So there's 3 elements of bonding, resilience, and celebration. You just picked the chapter 5, this personal professional check-in. I also call it an energy check, where everybody says once a month, what is it that we need to do to lift up each other's energy? But that, of course, requires that everybody knows where everybody's energy is. So I have everybody go around and do an energy check or a personal professional check-in. Slight differences. Energy check is shorter. And everybody goes around and says, what's going on in my life? What's bringing my energy down, personally and or professionally? And if you share that, the people in your team can be of service to each other. That's the social contract that we create. If we're going to share each other's energy where we are, like I'm struggling with my youngest son right now. I'm wondering whether, he's been a challenge emotionally since we got him at 12 years of age and out of foster care. And we started to make some breakthroughs. And in the conversation, I held him accountable for something, and he got very upset, and now he stopped talking to me again. And I wonder whether or not I was too short in bringing accountability into the conversation when we were making, so like I can share this challenge that I have, right? And then, or professionally, it's like I'm onboarding some new teammates, and I want to make sure that the team is truly practicing our own teamship principles. And something that I might be struggling with in terms of a personality type that may not be meshing with another personality type, and I bring that up, and I would bring that up to the team. Like I would say, Wendy, I'm worried about your and so's partnership, and I want to make sure it's truly co-elevating, and blah blah blah. I would say that out loud. And so these are my two struggles. And why do I focus on struggles? A lot of times people say, well, why are you focusing on the negative? Because the reality is, it's easy for everybody to smile and say everything's great. But it's what we're struggling with that really bonds and creates empathy. And I want to make sure that in a virtual hybrid world that we live in today, we don't have that walk down a hallway, that serendipitous coffee break conversation, that lunchroom conversation. We don't have it like we used to. So we've got to be purposeful in all this. Teams that share this monthly energy check, personal, professional, and are committed to each other's success, the average team has a relationship score of 2.8 on a scale of 0 to 5. And that's like okay, but not great. Once you start doing these energy checks, that number goes up into the mid 3s and to the low 4s over a period of 6 to 12 months. And that can be fully virtual. Whereas if you didn't do the energy check and you were a hybrid organization, it would go from 2.8 down to 2.3. So you got to get purposeful.
What you're talking about here are such practical things that don't require a huge amount of time. This is one of the things that I'm sure you hear a lot from clients. We don't have time to do too many different things, but you're making them an integral part of how people work together rather
Yes.
than a separate thing that you do, like separate
Yes.
training. This is all a piece of building this co-elevation that you're talking about as a natural
Indeed.
part of the way we work together.
Indeed. And then at the top of the pie chart that I showed you, the three layer cake, I'm sorry. At the top is what I call 21st century collaboration. So instead of using meetings as the primary form of your collaboration, we need to start shifting to asynchronous. So, I've got this large CPG company. We're reinventing the future of this company. It's falling behind right now on market share, and their supply chain is challenged in meeting the demands that are required. And so we did a stress test yesterday of supply chain. But before the stress test, I had everybody ship to the person who was going to be stress testing everything that they thought this person was missing and some ideas for them. And so before the person showed up to start the dialogue about where supply chain is, they've already known what people's pent up perception is of supply chain. So when they come in the room, they can start right away by addressing some of these people's perspectives. And they can say, I got this feedback from so-and-so who runs confection or whatever. And yes, I agree with you. I need to be focused more on running our supply chain in monthly agile sprints. That's a perspective that you have. That maybe we're missing some of the trends because we're not running on an agile process. Or somebody else that's like, no, I disagree with you. I actually think we are quite attuned to the chocolate beans or the coffee beans or whatever it is, prices and futures and blah, blah, blah. And here's why. So it's amazing what you can do by, I call it meeting shifting at that top level. And there's a lot of what we call 21st century collaboration. And how do you use software, asynchronous collaboration, AI? How are these things changing the way we collaborate?
Yeah, I think that idea of asynchronous meetings, because people just get so sick of all these meetings that are scheduled and feel like they're wasting
Amen.
time. And
Yeah.
you've got so many great details in your book. I can't emphasize enough how, because of our short conversation today, people need to get your book and really go deeper into each one of these topics that you're talking about, because it just can shift our whole way of thinking about how can we all be more productive. And I
So
love that you gave that example of the stress testing in advance, because that was one of the things I had picked up from that later chapter where you gave that as a specific example. Just,
yeah, so it's 10 shifts, and
yeah.
each chapter has a hero story of somebody who does it well, like the shift from conflict avoidance to candor. I talk about Bill from Comcast, Bill Connors from Comcast, and what he does with something called an outlier meeting, etc. And then there's 3 simple practices. I've already mentioned candor break. I mentioned the stress test, and then there's the diagnostic tool. So the book was written as a workbook for you and your team. You should get it for your whole team. After you read it and you're inspired by it, get it for your whole team, and then work through the chapters, and it'd be absolutely transformative for your team, as if I was your coach.
Well, since we've been in the 360 feedback business, for decades, I was really fascinated with chapter 10, where you're
Yeah.
talking about open 360, which, honestly, Keith, if people could do that well, they wouldn't need our tools because,
Well, I don't know. I do think that a thorough airing of a 360 is always valuable as a starting point. But ultimately, what we want is for people on an ongoing basis to give each other that feedback. So a very large high-tech company, we're about to do this, and they're scared to death. And I'm like, this is not going to be a problem. Everybody goes around and says, they start with Keith, might be the leader, and so everybody goes around and says, Keith, what I most admire and respect about your contribution to the team is X. Boom, 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 boom. And then, Keith, because I care about your success is so important to our success, I might suggest. And that's the critical feedback. Boom, boom, boom. What I love about this is the way I engineered it is your critique is an I might suggest going forward, not a call out of some specific thing in the past. Now,
yeah.
I know that when you're giving feedback formally to an employee, you want to be specific to an occurrence, etc. But when peers are giving each other feedback, I think it's important to make sure that it's a gift. Make sure that it's given as a just a humble recommendation. It can't be given as an assignment. It can't be given as a directive. Most feedback that we get in our lives since we were kids were directives. But when you start to give open 360s, it's just input. It's just input. So you have to make that shift in the contract that says you don't have to take everybody's advice. You have to hear it and then decide what you might want to work on.
Well, the other benefit of that, just in terms of improving communication skills, is for people to really be thinking about what do I want, what do I need, and then the person receiving it to not let their ego get in the way and to be able to hear it with an open mind and recognize when something lands. Like you say, you don't have to do something about every suggestion, but this idea of listening for the gold.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so do you ask people to make
That's
the
why they
connection?
still need you. You'll coach them on how to use these practices, and I would hope that you would. Like, I would love it for your practice to leave people after you've done your formal 360s, leave people with the book and the practices where they can continue to nurture that conversation with more transparency.
Yeah, they're very complimentary.
Yeah,
We'll,
I think
we'll
so. I think
look at
so.
doing that.
Which
We can
is
have a follow-up conversation around that. Keith, is there
love that.
anything else? I know we have a short time frame today. Is there anything else you'd like to share that we haven't covered yet?
There is one thing, and it actually might sound like a little bit of a curveball, but I'm so proud of this book. It's 20 years of research, and I do hope everybody goes out and gets it. But something I started recently is I went back to my original 3 books. Never Eat Alone, helping you build the most important network of your life. Who's Got Your Back, helping you get a group of people, your lifelines, that co-elevating group that won't let you fail. And Leading Without Authority, asking yourself, what is the relationship action plan I need to build in order to achieve the greatness that I want to achieve? And I put together a 8-week program online, and it's called, and you can get it at connectedsuccess.com, connectedsuccess.com. And I didn't want to lose the origin story of my work around critical relationships. And we call it Beyond Connections. How do you build the most important relationships that'll make you successful in your life, in your work, in your aspirations? And so I would just invite folks to take a look at that if they want to brush off the old books that I have and really bring it to life in your network, in your peer group, and in your ability to lead through others.
That's great. Thank you. We'll put that in the show notes page. And that
Thank you.
is Connect Success. Connected Success.
ConnectedSuccess.com. Yep.
Great. All right. Keith,
Beautiful.
thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Meredith.
This has been such a pleasure to get to talk to you today and share your wisdom with my audience. And I will repeat, get a copy of his book, Never Lead Alone. It will be a game changer for you if you put these into practice with your team. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning into my podcast. Now head over to growstrongleaders.com and check out the powerful tools we've created to help leaders strengthen their character and communication skills. Until next time, I'm Meredith Bell.